So, this other day, I was reading this short narrative book by Kahlil Gibran called The Prophet. And I think most of you might have read this book superficially, but while I was reading, I was just making notes on how to connect this with a psychological aspect of life. And yeah, I've got some things I'd like to share with you all. So, the first thing, the character chosen one and the beloved, who's called Al Mustafa in the story, it is not just a character, it's not just a man, but you can also see it as a metaphor for wisdom and self. So there's one of these chapters and it's titled as Giving. Then said a rich man, "Speak to us of giving." So the irony here, which we'll later figure that it's a rich man who is asking about how to give in life, how to be generous. Now, what I noticed about this chapter is that generosity is described not as a state of acting, but as a state of being. Rather than treating generosity as an act or an action, we have to incorporate it in our daily life. Okay? So I read out one of my favorite lines. You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give. For what are your possessions but things you keep and guard for fear you may need them tomorrow? So this line was really emphatic to me. And it's talking about how true giving comes from abundance in our own self, and not from duty or guilt or, just to please some God that is present above us. It comes from self-abundance, emotional, spiritual, and physical abundance. Then it's talking about two types of people. There are those who give little of the much which they have. So there are people that have a lot, but they just give a little bit of it, and they give it for recognition. So it is their hidden desire that they're giving it just to be recognized for the efforts and for their deeds. And this is what makes their gifts unwholesome. While on the other hand, there are those people who have little, yet they give it all. So, as you can see, that giving is a performative act and not a generative act. You can perform it, but you cannot generate or expect something out of it, out of giving. Giving is like one of the most sacred and essential things in life, an expression of faith, and not ego, because ego is very confining, whereas we can only give when we are abundant. Do you get me? Once again, the poet or Gibran is talking about three types of people. There are those who give joy away whenever they are giving something, and that joy is their reward, like they feel happy while giving something. And there are those who give with pain, and that pain is their baptism. And the third one is that there are those who give and know not pain in giving, nor do they see joy. So they're not feeling anything. They're just giving away out of abundance and are not expecting any kind of joy, or not even feeling any pain of parting with their thing. Not even some mindfulness. They just, like how they say in our culture, that give something so quietly that your right hand gives it and your left hand doesn't even know that you're given it. So yeah, now listen to this line. They give as in yonder valley, the myrtle breathes its fragrance into space. So it's comparing people like that to flowers. That there's a flower that's giving away its fragrance off to the space without any kind of mindfulness, right? So yes, I found that really beautiful. Now we'll move on to a part that is related to the Sigmund Freud, if you know a little bit of psychology, how he gave three terms, that was id, ego, and superego. So it's written here that you often say, I would give, but only to the deserving. This line that you are basically moralizing your superego. Let me just give you a little bit of backstory into it. The id is your instinctive mind, like it wants something and it needs to have it. For example, hunger, thirst, and other kinds of drives. Your ego is when you are thinking only about yourself, and your superego is when you're only thinking about others. So, according to Freud, we just needed to balance these three, and that's what makes our life easier and our psyche, like homeostatic state. Now, when I'm talking about moralizing the superego, we are judging people and we are saying that I will only give whatever my possession is to someone who is more deserving, like we always do. Whenever we see beggars on the road, we sometimes say that. So upon this, the poet says, the trees in your orchard say not so, nor the flocks in your pasture. They give that they may live, for to withhold is to perish. Now, this is one of the most emphatic lines I've read, that if we are withholding, we perish. And it's not for us, it's for the trees. But yeah, metaphorically for us as well, if we're not sharing, if we're not, even in an emotional aspect, if we're not sharing the things and we are withholding unto them, then we perish and we become emotionally weaker as well. Right? It's basically encouraging us to bypass the ego and act from the compassion itself. How beautiful is that? There's another thing he talks about, basically in the whole chapter, is that giving is not just about charity. It is about embodying the values and purposes. So instead of treating giving, like I said in the beginning, that it's a performative act, not a generative one. So it's not about generating the charity that you're about to give, but you should treat giving as a purpose of life, as a core value and a purpose that you need to fulfill in order to be a good human. So yes, I can relate that to the existential therapy or the logotherapy by Viktor Frankl, where he talks about creating meaning and purpose in life in order to fulfill a happy and satisfying life. All right? Yes, one of my favorite lines again, that see first that you yourself deserve to be a giver and an instrument of giving. So the poet or the author is just telling us that we are not the giver. We are not doing somebody a big, favor by giving them. We're just an instrument of giving. For in truth, it is life that gives unto life, while you who deem yourself a giver are but a witness. So beautiful. I just absolutely love this line, that I am just a witness, and it's basically life that is giving it to other people. So who am I to say that I am a giver and I did this and I did that? Yeah, so that's really like a punch in the face to the egoistic people. And yes, there is something about receivers as well. Giving gives a chance for both the giver and the receiver to be elevated on wings, as it's said here. So by giving, the person expresses no egoistic emotions, and by receiving also, you're doing a great job. Like, you're not showing any kind of ego. And that is again beautiful. For to be over mindful of your debt is to doubt the generosity of the person who has free-hearted earth for mother and God for father. So again it says